Hey friends, my name is Michael. I'm one of the pastors here at Galveston Central Church.
And I'm Julia. I'm one of the other pastors here.
Yeah, we're excited to be with you this morning. It's Saturday morning, and I've got Dr. Matt Dacso and Dr. Manuela Murray with me here, and we're going to do a conversation about COVID-19 and vaccines and try to address as many questions and myths and facts as we can over the next little bit. So before we get started, Dr. Dacso, Dr. Murray, would you guys just take a moment and maybe introduce yourselves, what you do for work at UTMB, how long you've been in Galveston? Dr. Murray, let's start with you if that's okay.
Sure. I'm Manuela Murray. Hi, thank you for having us. I am a pediatrician. I have been in Galveston since 2005. I did my pediatric residency at UTMB, and I guess they like me enough to keep me. So I've been here for quite a while now. I do, as a pediatrician, of course, I'm very involved with vaccines, and I'm also involved because we are in a large academic medical center that does a lot of vaccine research. I have been involved in a lot of vaccine trials, mostly with children, of course. And so I'm here to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Wonderful. We're so glad to have you. Thank you for making time for doing this, Dr. Murray. And Dr. Dacso, the sexy sax man himself, right?
Oh man, that's awesome.
What an intro, right?
I'll take it. I'll take it. That trumps doctor any day. Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Matt Dacso. I'm an internal medicine physician, so I do primary care. I do both outpatient medicine, so I have a practice and I see patients, and then I do an inpatient hospital work. I also run our international programs, our global health programs, participate in that, our Center for Global and Community Health, getting students involved in meaningful work, both in our community and then in abroad as well. But since March of last year, I've basically just been doing clinical work around COVID-19. So I've been less involved in the vaccine side until recently, till they became amazingly available, and more on the clinical care side. So it's really been nice to start to pivot away from curative stuff to preventive.
Yeah.
Awesome, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. Would y'all share just a little bit about what this year has been like as medical professionals? Any anecdotes about being doctors in the midst of COVID or anything like that?
Manuela, you want to get it started?
So on my end of the world, as you all know, COVID hasn't really affected children as much as it has adults. And so March 15 last year, I came back from a spring break and UTMB was going crazy, just like close all the clinics, open some selected sites as COVID clinics, and we're just going to concentrate everything on COVID care. So for us, it was like the kids, oh my goodness, they need to continue to be vaccinated. We need to continue to provide well child checks. So let's create this hub clinic where all the pediatricians from UTMB that have pediatric patients can come and have like a safe haven for these kids to get their well child checks, their health supervision visits, and their vaccines done. So that was, I think, a big contribution from us in the pediatric world. We were also asked to see patients up to 40 years old, which we usually just go to 18. So that was a little out of our league, but we jumped in and we helped in some of the urgent cares to do that. But I really haven't been like in the COVID ward, so I'll let Matthew talk about that.
Yeah, I would say that actually, as Dr. Murray was talking, I was remembering that I took my last international trip on February 2nd of 2020, and I usually travel a lot. And by the time I was getting back, we were seeing cases starting to circulate in the U.S. And then we got our first case in the Houston area on March 4th of 2020, and then not shortly. That was in Fort Bend County, and then shortly thereafter, we had our first cases here in Galveston. And as Dr. Murray said, our whole clinical model pivoted from what we do on a day-to-day basis, which is see patients, make rounds, to kind of trying to figure out how to adapt our system completely to the time of a pandemic. I really think the university and actually Galveston prepared really well. I think we very quickly mobilized, the clinical resources. We had testing that was developed very quickly, to a point where we were running testing for people in Harris County, right? I mean, I think Galveston was really, because of the medical branch and because of all the work in emerging infectious diseases that's already done, we were kind of well prepared. But on a personal level, I mean, I think it was, at the very beginning, I think we were all kind of on edge, but very excited we want to be a part of this to serve it. We want to serve the need, which is the need is the pandemic. And I think as the year has worn on, I think that the fatigue has set in, and you will hear this from nurses, from clinicians, from staff, from people, from people all the way from people who are helping to sanitize the rooms, to serving the food, to taking care of the patients, that everybody's pretty much, we're all tired of COVID-19. So we're ready to kick it out. And that's, I think the pivot, as I said before, the pivot from really focusing on creating these systems to take care of these surges after surges, is now pivoting to the systems mobilizing to vaccinate people. And that is, I think I can speak for myself, and I'm sure Dr. Murray has her thoughts as well. But I mean, I think it's incredible what we've seen in the last year, from the development of the science to the distribution of a life-saving product. So I think it's an incredible time to be in medicine. I think it's been a difficult time for a lot of us to be in medicine. We've seen a lot of struggle in our community. We've seen a lot of struggle in our businesses. We've seen a lot of struggle in our faith communities, and really everybody's struggled in some way. But I really think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So it's getting good.
Yeah, it's so refreshing to hear your kind of hope and optimism and seeing, kind of the future. So, and on behalf of Julia and Central, and, we are just so grateful for both of you and the entire UTMB staff to have a resource like UTMB in our backyard. I think that's something we take for granted sometimes. So thank you guys and your teams for the tireless work and often thankless work during this time. So just really appreciate that. Julie and I, being pastors, we're primarily concerned with the spiritual health of people, right? But we also know that your spiritual life is part of your actual life. And so issues like public health, certainly COVID-19, the way that's played into people's lives, it's part of the reason we want to have this conversation, is to spread awareness and to keep people updated on accurate information, because there's so much out there. So before we sort of get into the nitty gritty about vaccine questions, just to sort of turn this back on us, I'd ask the three of you guys, Julia, you as well, have you guys received your vaccine yet? And what was your experience like, if you have?
I'll go first. So I am actually a participant in the Moderna trial. And so I got my first shot of something that I didn't know what it was back in September. And I got my second shot in October. And deep inside of me, I kind of knew that I had gotten placebo. I kept touching my arm, please hurt a little bit. No, nothing. So as soon as the Moderna vaccine was approved in the United States at the end of December, they went ahead and unblinded us. And they told me on December 31st, my goal was to get it before the end of the year. On December 31st, they unblinded me and they told me that I had gotten placebo. So that's when I got my first dose of vaccine. It was hard because some of my colleagues were getting it December 14 when the Pfizer was approved. And so I was itching to get it. And the first dose went well. The second dose I got 4 weeks later. It made me feel a little bit of body ache for a few hours, but after several hours of just taking it easy, it was like they flipped a switch and I was like, okay, let's go. I'm ready for a walk. So I think it was definitely worth it. Definitely not any symptoms that I will not take it again for.
Yeah, it's funny, Manuela, because I was actually in the Pfizer trial. Um, so a lot of us, like, I was doing so much clinical work in the hospital that I was like, I really need to get into a trial. Like, I just, if anybody's going to be exposed, it's probably going to be me. And I'd rather like take my chances. And you know, it's a new type of platform for vaccines, and so I think everybody was kind of like, I mean, I will tell you that it affected my decision making even to participate as a trial participant, because I was like, you know what, like if it wasn't a pandemic, I might think through this more. Like I might be more nervous about it, but it's a pandemic, and I mean, I trust the science. I trust the safety, the safety trials have been done, and it's built on good science. And so I enrolled, and I actually turns out I got my dose of something. My first one was August 4th, and my second one was August 25th. They actually just gave me my card last week, so I didn't actually know what the dates were. And it turns I'd had quite a bit of arm pain actually. Like I mean, I'm not going to say it was like a dead arm. It was just a little bit sore, and for a day or so, and then it went away. And I was like, well, that was probably some good placebo. Maybe it was like they really had like a great placebo, something really cooked up for us. And then the second shot, this is why the placebo effect is so strong, because I was convinced that I'd gotten a placebo. I felt kind of bad about 18 hours in, just kind of like Dr. Murray said, like a little achy. I'm usually pretty energetic, and I felt tired, and I took a 2-hour nap, and then I was fine. I mean, it was kind of like she said, it was it was a pretty quick resolution. But I was like, that placebo really knocked me down. I'm all in my head. And turns out I had gotten the shot in the actual vaccine in August. So I'd say the overall experience was very positive.
So let me add something to that. I actually felt very comfortable about this vaccine platform. And the reason for that is because this is not a new science. This has been around, and we have been using these for cancer patients. And so if somebody has a tumor, they can take the cells from that tumor, they can create something that looks exactly like this vaccine, and they can deliver it into that body. And we have seen tumors literally melt away in front of our eyes. And so I knew about these. In fact, one of our pediatric residents that graduated from the program a few years ago, it's very much, she's a hematologist oncologist, and she's very much into that. And she has come back to us to present some conferences about it and the work that she's doing. So I actually felt so comfortable with this that I put my, as Pfizer opened up the trials for the teenagers, my 4-year-old and my daughter.
Wonderful, man. Well, thanks for sharing that too. And Julia, you received both doses of yours too, right? No placebo.
Yeah.
You weren't even allowed to do that. So
Yeah, so kind of because of the nature of the work that we do, being in person and working with at-risk people, I had an opportunity to get my first shot on February 3rd. And kind of like y'all said, my arm hurt and I had some aches, but really nothing, not a lot of reaction at all. I was like fine by the next day. And then I got my second shot actually just a couple days ago on March 3rd. And it took me out for about 24 hours. I was pretty tired and body aches and a little bit of nausea. But by, let's see, I got it on Wednesday. By like Thursday, late afternoon, I was fine. And I would absolutely get it again. And yeah, my brother actually, I probably shouldn't talk about this, whatever. My brother actually just had COVID, and it like, he's the closest person to me who's had it, and it sounded horrible. Like this vaccine was definitely better than that. So yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, and I got to receive my first dose last Thursday. So I love that everybody's at least had one. I'm like slacking here. I got to get my second one hopefully in 4 weeks. So first one, same experience, sore arm, but not that much different than any other kind of shot that you receive, which was great. So yeah.
I've decided that if I don't have a reaction of some kind, I'm going to request a second or another like vaccine. Like I'm going to want another dose, because that's the sign of your body reacting and doing the right thing. You know, that's those cells that are learning about how to respond to the virus are going to that place where you put the vaccine, and it should probably feel, you should feel a little something while that happens. And so every time, you know, if I've had a flu shot, I'm like, well, you know, if I don't feel it, you know, you know, is it doing anything? Right. So I think the side effects get they get a lot of press, but in fact, they're not only are they they're you correct me if I'm wrong, Manuela, but I think they're really the exception, not the rule, as far as the trials go. And they actually are a sign of your body doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were cutting up. I didn't quite hear what you said. I know you said my name.
Oh yeah, no, I was just talking about how like the side effects that you get from the vaccine are actually a positive thing. They're like your body is responding positively to the stuff that's being given to you.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the side effects that some people have experienced is actually a lymph node under their arm, in their armpit. And that's definitely, I mean, that's what our body does. When we have a strep throat, we get swollen lymph nodes right here in our neck. And so it's the same thing. If we got the shot right here, it's very normal for you to get a swollen lymph node in your armpit. And that just means your immune system is doing what it's supposed to.
So I think this is a great transition into sort of vaccines generally. And Dr. Manuela, this may be your kind of expertise doing pediatrics. So do you want to maybe speak a little bit about how, just generally, how vaccines work, or maybe specifically the COVID vaccine? What's going on in our bodies that, yeah, vaccines are effective?
Yeah. So, but I think my internet connection is a little unstable. Can you guys hear me good?
Yeah, you're here right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Good. So there is a lot of different kinds of platforms for vaccines, and we have a lot of vaccine, pretty much some way that they work. But ultimately, what vaccines are doing is, one way or another, they are sending a message into your cells, the cells of your body's defense cells, to make antibodies, which is what that virus or that so that in pediatrics we talk about a photo album. So when babies are born, they're born with an empty photo album, and their immune system job is to take pictures as they start going to daycare. The mom takes them to Walmart, just take pictures of all those bugs so that the next time that you see them, you recognize because you have a picture in your photo album, a picture of it with your immune system. The vaccine helps you do that actually in a safer way, because you don't experiment the illness itself, for your body to actually make that immune response and remember, have that memory, that we call it immunologic memory. So that next time that the disease comes around in front of you, you're actually fighting it from the get-go.
That's so helpful. So I've heard on a couple, some folks talking that are saying that the COVID vaccine isn't really a vaccine. It's actually something different. It is, I've heard gene therapy been kind of thrown around. I wonder if you guys could just talk generally about how the COVID vaccine maybe fits under the umbrella of vaccines. What do we do with this gene therapy language? Matt, do you want to jump in on any of that?
Yeah, I can start, and then probably Dr. Murray can fill in my gaps. Yeah, you know, it's really interesting, because you know what Dr. Murray was talking about just a minute ago is that, you know, a whole purpose of a vaccine is to teach our body something, right? It teaches your body how to make these antibodies so that when you're, when you're exposed to something, you don't get so sick, or you fight it off immediately, or you avoid going to the hospital, right? I mean, there's a variety of different ways to make vaccines. And so if we think about the language of genetics, right? This is the thing that everybody gets worried about. They get worried about, like, you're injecting some like genetics into my body. So, the way that things work is that you have your DNA, and that's sort of the code of your body, right? That's like what writes that's what writes the code of your body. And DNA gets turned into RNA, right? And then RNA gets turned into protein. That is the most basic thing that we can do in science. Is take DNA, make RNA, and make protein. So these vaccines, their job is, at the end of the day, what we want is the protein. Okay, we want the protein. We want our body to recognize, especially the protein that is on the coronavirus, right? We want our body to recognize that coronavirus protein, which for the vast majority of the vaccines is called the spike protein. If you've seen like the coronavirus, it's called the coronavirus. Corona means crown in Spanish, right? Because it has all of these really beautiful and deadly little spikes sticking out of it, and that's the spike protein, and that's what binds to your body and lets the virus come in and do all of its replicating. Right now, the coronavirus is an RNA virus, so when it gets into your body, it's already RNA. So what it's doing is it's using your cells to make protein, right, and then re-synthesize itself, and then get out into the rest of the body and cause havoc. So what you're doing with these vaccines, especially the ones that the 3 that have now been approved by the FDA, there are 2 that are messenger RNA. So someone is getting injected with a little droplet with mRNA inside, right? And there are these nanoparticles, and you inject it into the arm, and those nanoparticles with the RNA, it's not DNA. We can't make DNA from RNA. It's not possible in the human body, right? Without a special kind of virus, right? This is the code, DNA, RNA, protein. So it's already an RNA. So the messenger RNA goes into your cells, and it gets translated into the spike protein. And that's all it is. It's just the RNA making the spike protein. And that's the mRNA ones, which are the Pfizer and the Moderna. So you make the spike protein, your immune cells come and they sniff around and they see this spike protein sitting around in your arm, and they say, this is not right. And they take it up and they grind it up into pieces, and they start making antibodies to it, right? And that's why when we get our second dose, we tend to feel a little worse, because we're now primed for it. We're ready. Like Dr. Murray said, we've like got the photo album, and we're now really like engraving it. The other one that has been approved is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and that's an adenovirus vector. So what that's saying is, like, we're not going to give you the mRNA. We're going to put the spike protein RNA inside a harmless virus. It's just a virus that is like that is in some kind of animals, right? And we're going to just put that in there, and then in the same way, that adenovirus is going to do nothing, and your body is going to recognize the spike protein RNA and make spike protein, and then you're going to respond to it. So I'll let Dr. Murray kind of fill in, because she probably has a more, let's say, comprehensive grasp of the science.
Yeah. No, you did a really good job at explaining that. I think that one thing that is important to highlight, because people are wondering, is that the mRNA that is in the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine is actually synthetic. There is nothing about that mRNA that it's a real part of the virus. So they made it in the lab, and they put it into the little droplets of vaccine, and they put it in the vaccine. So actually, it's one of the only vaccines we have where absolutely no part of the real virus goes into your system. So that, I think that makes it very safe. The other thing that people worry about, I hear a lot from parents getting their kids vaccinated, is they worry about preservatives. And believe it or not, this vaccine has no preservatives, at least the Pfizer and Moderna, the mRNA vaccine. All that is in that vaccine are things that we consume every single day in our life, which is salt, sugar, and fat. And other than that, it's got the messenger RNA. So it's, in my opinion, probably one of the safest vaccines that we have.
Thanks, y'all. That's so helpful. So next question, just thinking about, people tend to think about vaccinating themselves, or I'm sure Dr. Murray, you come up against this, like vaccinating their kids as a really personal decision and an individual decision. But we know that vaccinating ourselves has a lot to do with protecting people around us as well. And, reaching kind of the term that we hear often is herd immunity. So I wonder if y'all could speak to that. Why is it important for as many of us to get vaccinated as we can?
I can take a whack at that one. So, that's a really great question. And, we are in a time where people are overwhelmed with information and they don't always know kind of like what to listen to and what not to listen to. So, this idea of herd immunity is that at some point, a virus is a very smart animal. It's a very smart thing, right? It just wants to survive, just like any other living thing. We can debate whether the viruses are alive or not. We know what they do, right? But we know that viruses just want to survive. So your goal in all of this is to give the virus as little chance to survive as possible. A lot of different ways to go about doing that, right? We do things like we physically distance, we put on our masks, we know it's an aerosol virus, comes from the breath, and so we cover our face, we distance ourselves, we wash our hands, we are doing things at policy level to try to control spread of people. We want to reduce the ability of the virus to go from a person to a person. If it doesn't get to go from a person to a person, it doesn't get to live, right? So this idea of herd immunity is that there are enough people in the population that have antibodies, which means that they can recognize this thing and fight it off and produce and reduce it from spreading to others. Okay, so vaccines are one very important part of getting to the level where we think, or that epidemiologists think, myself not being an epidemiologist, I won't ever pretend to be one, but public health professionals and epidemiologists, they say we need 80% or more of the population to have antibodies, to be able to say that, well, it's safe now, and it's safe. We can say that there's enough immune people out there where this virus will have nowhere to go. So that's the whole idea of herd immunity, because again, virus, if it can't go anywhere, it's gonna go away. So there's a lot of determinants in there, right? There's virus, there's the characteristics of the virus. So maybe there's a variant of the virus that actually is easier to transmit, right? So we worry about those things. There's we always worry about that the virus could figure out a way that our antibodies won't work against it, right? So that's why it's so urgent now that we must get vaccines out there in the population, because we're already seeing variants that are spreading around that are potentially, certainly from the studies we've seen, the vaccines we have are still effective. But we always worry that the virus is smart and the virus could figure out a way to evade our immune system. Then all of the work we've done kind of goes away. So the more people that get vaccinated, the less chance the virus has to move from a person to a person. And I know, Manuela, you just reconnected. So do you want to jump in there kind of about why people should get vaccinated and what are we talking about when we talk about herd immunity?
Yeah, I think you did a really good job at explaining it. And that's the basics of it, just having the least amount of people for the virus to survive. It's pretty much don't give him any food or her.
I think the other thing that is important to highlight there is that there are two ways to get herd immunity. And one is through natural infection and the other one is through a vaccine. But from the experience that we have had with more than 500,000 Americans having passed away from this ugly virus, it is definitely our best weapon to use the vaccine, to use such an amazing science that was developed in such record time. And we need to talk about why that happened so fast, rather than just paying the price of a lot more people dying.
Well, I think that's a great segue sort of into sort of what felt like a very rushed process for those of us on the outside, right? So we were just talking earlier that, the first case would have been in the city of Houston, I guess a year ago yesterday. And, our church hasn't met in person since it'll be a year now, I think next Sunday. So for vaccine lengths, that seems like a very short time, especially when you guys were talking about getting the first trials in, I think you said September. So maybe talk a little bit about, is this thing, safe from just how quickly it came about, and what all went into creating this vaccine? I'll let you just kind of run with that.
Okay, I love this question, so I'll take this one because it's the best example of science being as pure as it can be, with us eliminating the lack of funding for it and all of the layers of politics and everything that happens that doesn't let science get to where it needs to be. So there is actually 3 huge reasons why we have a vaccine now, when less than a year ago we didn't even know what COVID was. So the first thing is, when we do clinical trials for vaccines, we usually are only able to recruit somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 people per trial. And we're talking about trials that are being done in multiple centers across the country, sometimes even around the world. But because people, for COVID, people were willing to sign up, once because they wanted this thing gone, and second because they were hopeful that 50% chance to get some protection early. Hey, I'll sign up for it, right? So we had more than 30,000 people sign up for each of the Pfizer and Moderna trials. So the number of participants was huge. So the way vaccine trials work is they're going to give half of the people placebo and half of the people vaccine. And then they're going to look to see how many people in each group actually develop the disease, how many people in each group actually get COVID. And so since the second reason, this leads us to the second reason, was that since COVID was happening so fast, so many people were getting sick, it was really quick that we got to a number of cases in the vaccine trials that was what we call significant, which just means it's enough number of people got sick for us to be able to say that the difference between the placebo group and the vaccine group is significant enough to say that this vaccine is a certain percentage effective. Now, the third reason is billions of dollars went into this research. No question asked. It was a huge gamble by the government. They said, vaccine company, I am buying from you thousands and thousands of doses of this vaccine before you even know that it's effective. So back in March, April, they said, we will fund this trial. We're buying this from you, regardless of whether it's effective or not. So Pfizer could have come back in December and said, you know what? It doesn't work for anything. And the money was already spent. So we got really, really lucky, and thanks to science, that the vaccine was actually so amazingly effective. We were actually hoping for a vaccine that was more than 70% effective. We will have settled for that. And when we heard that both the Moderna and the Pfizer were 95% effective, we were blown away. We were so happy. It was party time.
Yeah, and I'll add on that too, is that there's this I think there's this misconception that like it was very hasty and there was all these like it was the, you know, I mean, I listen, I also you know, I take care of adult patients, many of whom they don't like getting vaccines, and so they're always ready to tell me kind of why. And the reason that a lot of people say is, well, it feels rushed, and you know that they don't trust the drug companies, and where did they come up with this anyway? And this is as Dr. Murray mentioned earlier, especially mRNA and even adenovirus vector vaccines. These have been used in other purposes in clinical care. They've just never been used to respond to a pandemic. Except I would say there have been trials looking at mRNA vaccines in SARS-1, which was the first SARS pandemic, Ebola, so HIV. These are things that have been tested and tried. This is not, it's just not worked like this. And it's all of the pieces came together because in an unprecedented way. Remember that scientists are competitive people, and so you know, and institutions compete with each other. But suddenly, we had a shared vision and shared goal, and we had to come together and fight this disease, and had to do it together. And so people were working together, and they said, "Here's my information. Here's," and they came up with these things not just out of the air. It was based on years, decades even of good science that led to us to be able to find, like at this moment, to reach up and just grab all like the sum total of all that knowledge and put it all together into practice with all of the things that Dr. Murray said: the money, the support, the fact that people were willing to enroll, the fact that we had patients to enroll and we could do it quickly. So I think all of those things came together to make it happen. And it, you know, I get a lot of people who are not trusting of the science. I say this has been going on. Even there's adenovirus vector vaccines for Ebola. In fact, going to Guinea right now, right, to go and take care of people in the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. There's these types of vaccine platforms are now going there, right? This has really energized people.
It's a shame that that twist on it isn't being told, right? Instead of it's this very scary, look how fast, it must not be safe. Instead of it being like, look at what a beautiful collaboration, right? Of all of these people and all of this work that's been, like you said, probably decades in the making. And then we get to come together without all of the red tape and really serve the people around us. I just think that's a really compelling story. So thank you guys for that kind of twist on that, and gives you hope for like what could be, right? If we could do this kind of collaborative work in the future, especially among scientists and competing institutions, you know, what else could the scientific community sort of tackle? It's very cool.
Yeah, we are extremely excited, especially about the mRNA technology, because what it means is this is a platform that you could literally, any bug that comes out and tries to attack us, we can just read its code, put it in the platform, and deliver in a vaccine. So even if we come to realize that the newest strains, that the vaccine that we have right now is not effective for the newest strains, we could very easily just grab the code from the newest strains that pop up and develop a booster for it. So that's very exciting too. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully this one works. But if we need to, we have a way.
But Michael, I do want to just speak to that distrust, because that is real, right? That's not something that I think myself, Dr. Murray, we don't take that lightly. We feel like we have to earn people's trust, right? We earn people's trust by having these conversations. I mean, we've given, you know, healthcare system in the last 50 years, you know, plus has given people a lot of reasons not to trust, right? There's been a lot of issues in pharmaceutical industry and I mean, all these things. This is all well known, and healthcare industry and insurance and all this privatization, and that's fine. But what we've done is sometimes there are people who have been left out, and there's been system reasons why there is that mistrust, and that's okay. We have to sort of, I think, own that, embrace it, and then sort of try to help flip the narrative, like you said. You know, this is an exciting time to be doing this.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Matt, because I do think there's a difference between people in particular communities that because of yeah, I don't want to say like faulty science, but like there's different reasons for this distrust and this disbelief, right? Well, you have communities that have been marginalized, vulnerable communities that have distrust for very different reasons than other. And I think that distinction and that nuance is really important. That way there's not this elitist kind of, well, obviously everybody should get vaccines because we all know this. It's like, well, folks have sometimes very valid reasons for having some skepticism. And I think your transparency in that and yeah, willing to name those things is really helpful here. So thank you all for doing that. Julia, did you have another question?
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump to, so I think you kind of already answered this, Dr. Murray, but I got the vaccine. Does that mean now I have COVID? Will I test positive after I got the vaccine? And then kind of on the flip side of that, if I already had COVID, should I get the vaccine? Yeah, so how is it actually related to COVID? And yes, I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So when you get the disease, when you get COVID, your body is going to mount some sort of immune response. You are going to have some weapons to fight the virus if it comes around again. But what we know is that we call that natural immunity because you get it just from having the disease. What we know is that natural immunity is definitely way weaker than the immunity that is generated from the vaccine. And especially with these vaccines, the effectiveness is so high. So we can pretty much say that you have only a 5% chance of getting the disease, and that if you get it, you are very unlikely, probably zero, to have severe disease, complications, and to die from it. And that's huge, because actually when we are making vaccines, that is what we shoot for. We want to prevent severe disease, complications, and death. And that kind of takes me to the flu shot. A lot of people are like, well, I don't want to get the flu shot because it doesn't really work. It's only 50% effective, depending on the year that you look at it. Well, guess what? Especially for those of you that have been getting the flu shot every single year, you're very unlikely to get it. But if you do get it, you're not going to die from it. We can guarantee you that. And so that it's pretty, that's the difference from just, if you had COVID, you should still get your vaccine because you want to have that stronger immunity. Now, can you get COVID from the vaccine? Absolutely not. And we've said it many times here. No part of the virus is going into your system. Now, there have been cases where you are exposed to COVID right around the time that you get your first dose, and you might get COVID after you have the vaccine. But it wasn't from the vaccine, it was because you were exposed around that time. In fact, we know that you don't achieve that high level of protection until about 2 weeks after your second dose. So definitely extremely important to continue to practice physical distancing and wearing your mask and good hygiene.
That's so helpful.
That's a great summary. I have nothing to add. That's perfect.
It's so good. Manuela's crushing it. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing.
This is great.
I do it every day of my life.
This is your world, right? Yeah, exactly. Wow. No, this is so helpful. Something I was reading about today that I don't know much about this side, but something that popped up was talking about how this vaccine messes with your immune system in a negative way that actually can weaken it. And then there was some subtext stuff about what they called ADE, which was antibody dependent enhancement. I don't know a whole lot about this, but I don't know if this is something that you guys have come across. I think the idea is that your natural immune system becomes dependent on these other things and doesn't operate naturally, something like that. Do you guys have any thoughts around sort of that kind of thing popping up?
So I'll take a crack at it, and then Dr. Murray can correct my immunology. So I will just say that I'm not a virologist and I'm not an immunologist, right? I'm a clinician who just has fallen into COVID-19 because that's what we do now, right? But I have looked into this, and there's always a worry among people who, especially people who are hesitant about vaccines, or who may be worried that vaccines are causing problems. There is a large and growing community of people who are trying to sort of opt out of vaccines because of a lot of issues that with trust in the science, and they're worried about potential immune effects, and they're worried about effects on their children. And the worst thing we can do is alienate people. Like the worst thing we can do is alienate people. All we can do is try to stand by the science. So there's a few things about the types of antibodies that the body makes in response to the vaccines. The worry from some of these folks that are talking about these kind of like, well, if I get the vaccine, is it going to cause me to have an immune response against something else? Like you hear people talk about fertility. You hear people talk about skin, autoimmune diseases, that it's going to, if I get the vaccine, it might cause a nerve disorder like Guillain-Barré disorder, which we certainly have that's happened before with like flu vaccine, but never with anything else. So these are legitimate worries that people have. And what we can say, I think with a really strong degree of confidence, is that the vaccines that are out there now for this virus, that because they are, like Dr. Murray said, they're made in a lab, they're made synthetically. And those codes, that code that is in that RNA, when it's made into protein, it doesn't react with other stuff in your body. It doesn't react with the type, like your nerve cells or your genitalia cells or the reproductive system, or it doesn't cross-react with that. Now, this ADE thing, I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and I'm no expert. But what I will say is that, in the 1960s, when we were, giving people different kinds of vaccines, I mean, what we were giving people were like whole like viruses, right? We would kill them, and they would inactivate them. We were giving large parts of viruses so people their immune systems could recognize them. And in some cases, there was this worry about like priming the immune system, and that people could, possibly have a worse outcome, or they could do worse after they got the vaccine. There is not a single that I know of reported case of this from any modern vaccine. So all the stuff that's the flu shots, even the measles shot, all these vaccines that have been developed in the last few decades, this thing doesn't happen. So it's something that for some has been used as a scare tactic, and that may be a scare tactic, or it may be a legitimate concern. But what I recommend is that people do their own research. They look at all sides of the issue, and they ask someone like Dr. Murray, any of the great like vaccine experts that are around. There are any number of people who can help explain those things. And so if people are worried, we embrace the worry, we let people express their worry, and then we help to discuss the science in a way that is understandable. And I think, Dr. Murray, you can speak to this, but I think whenever those things come up about antibody priming and that it's going to attack other parts of my body, it's usually because they're worried and they're scared and they don't fully understand what's going on. And so, and you have much more experience kind of talking to parents about that issue. So maybe you want to weigh in as well.
Yeah, so one of the things that I like to highlight in regards to that is that our immune system cells are actually one of the very few cells in our body that are capable of englobing that particle that is outside and catching it and putting it in it to process it and to start making the antibodies or the defense mechanisms against it. Most of the other cells in our body are not able to do that. So even if the little vaccine particle comes around our other cells, it's just going to bounce. It's not, the cells have a really thick membrane and a cell wall that specifically protects them so that they don't get destroyed, so that they don't end up getting something inside of them that is not supposed to be in there. They have very specific channels for the things that they do need to allow inside of them to go in. And so it really shouldn't be a concern, because only our immune system cells are made to incorporate these particles inside of them. And then the other thing that I wanted to say is that, and you know more about these, you have probably seen more of these, Matthew, than I have, is COVID itself produces complications like Guillain-Barré and these things that are worried about. We have not seen one case with the vaccines. So there you have it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Manuela, that what I worry about is not the antibodies that are made. I worry about the what the effect of the virus is, right? And so when that spike protein binds to its receptor, it starts causing a lot of problems in a lot of different parts of the body, right? And that's what we see in the clinics. That's what we see on the hospital.
There is a lot of times that even though a person doesn't have the disease, they can carry their virus in the mucosa of their nose or their mouth. And while it's not infecting them, it can infect others. And clinical trials are currently being done in people that have been vaccinated. They're swabbing them to see if the virus lives in their nasal mucosa and mouth. And so once those results of those clinical trials start coming out, then we're going to have more information. So that's one of the reasons why you want to continue to protect yourself, because we just don't know this virus well enough to know how our system responds to it. And the other thing is that there are new strains. And like I was saying, although we are very hopeful, and so far the studies have shown that the vaccines that we have are effective against what's out there right now, we never know when the virus is going to mutate or change enough to overcome that protection. And so you don't want to let your guard down.
Yeah, and I'll say this kind of from the adult perspective as well, is that I think we need some optimism too, right? Like people need something to look forward to. There's a lot of questions that I get, like, God, man, why you're telling me I got to get this vaccine, but then you're telling me that like I don't get any benefits from it. I don't get to take off my mask. I don't get to like hug my parents. And I'm going to say this, and I think probably most people would agree that if you have two people who are fully vaccinated, who have plenty of antibodies, and you don't have anybody around who's not been vaccinated, right? And you are comfortable, and you are like, I mean, we always talk about like seeing parents, right? And the people who haven't seen their grandparents. And the idea is that we should probably start letting people hug each other and to be around each other without a mask if they want, if they choose. But that's, again, those are personal decisions. I completely agree with Dr. Murray that in our household, like we still are, we're still, even though my in-laws and my parents are fully vaccinated now, we are still masking because our children are not vaccinated, right? And so there's still virus there. They're possibly, right? I think they're pretty safe. They're masked up all day in school. They're doing great. Nobody's sick, but we know that we're not 100%. But if you have a room full of, we were talking to some folks in our practice, we were saying, can we start to, when we have a bunch of health workers who are fully vaccinated, can we let them eat lunch together? Can we start to do things like that? And I think we're getting to that point. I think as I said, I think the light is at the end of the tunnel. If we don't give people kind of that thing to look forward to, then we're going to have a harder time getting people to take the vaccine. Now, does that mean that, we should just kind of like ditch the masks altogether? No. I think like in public places, we're going to still have to kind of watch ourselves, and that's like Dr. Murray said, there's lots we're still figuring out. And so you're not going to find a lot of people who are so confident that they are like, that they're just going to say, let's, especially in healthcare, most of us are very, we want to be real careful because we're obviously people who could, could spread the disease unintentionally. We don't want to do that, right? So we're going to probably all continue to mask up for a while. And ultimately it's on everybody, everybody's individual, just, kind of their liberties to either put it on or not. But I think we're getting so close. Like I would say, I wouldn't throw out the mask yet. We're getting so close. We just got to give people hope and let them hang on just a little bit longer.
Yeah. want to clarify that everything that I was saying, I was referring mostly to like public places and places where you really don't know who is around you and what their vaccination status is and that. So
Are you gonna, what do you, Dr. Murray, are you gonna like, once everybody's vaccinated in your family, are you guys gonna like allow your, I mean, we're discussing this as well. Like, are you, what are you,
yeah.
are you gonna let, kind of like hug your parents and stuff?
So, well, for me, it's kind of easy because my parents are very far away. But we are pretty much alone here. We have a good group of friends. But my husband's parents are in Wisconsin. Mine are in Colombia in South America. So yeah, but I definitely do think that once we are all vaccinated, when we get to see each other, we will for sure hug and probably be a little more careful with the kids, even though it's hard. It's hard. We went to Wisconsin last summer and we really tried very hard to physical distance the kids from the grandparents, and it was a challenge.
So with all this like optimism, and I mean, y'all got me like fired up right now about there may be a post-pandemic future, right? So if folks are watching and they're realizing, oh, to sort of help create this reality that we're dreaming about right now, I really need to go do my part, get my vaccine. This is something that I want to do and I feel safe. How do folks go about doing that? I think all of us that are in Galveston County saw our phones kind of light up today that said now testing is available, or not testing, but vaccine, at least the waiting list is available to everyone. So Dr. Murray, Dr. Dacso, how do folks go about getting signed up for this?
I'll take that one. So what that announcement that was made today meant is that we want everybody that is thinking about getting a vaccine to go ahead and sign up for it, because who gets the vaccine is still going to be determined by the Texas state of Texas state. And so if your group opens up for vaccination, we want to be able to just go to that registry and send everyone an invitation for it. And so it's going to be a way more efficient process if we already have people signed up. So when their turn comes, they can get it right away. So the best example is teachers. So just a couple of days ago, the state of Texas said we're going to vaccinate our teachers, and really anybody that is involved in childcare. You don't have to belong to a public school district. If you work for a private school, for a daycare, if you have a small daycare at home, that qualifies you as a children caregiver or education provider. And we are going to have vaccination day at our Walter Hall Park hub for the teachers on March 13, where it's only going to be teachers. And our vaccination clinics are actually going to have extended hours so that the teachers that work, 9 to 4 middle school schedules and cannot get to a clinic during the regular business hours can get their vaccine in the evening. So pretty much we're very optimistic that we're getting a really good amount of vaccine on a daily basis, and that if we have your information when your turn comes, we want to invite you for the vaccine as soon as possible.
Yeah, and at least in Galveston County, that's done through there's a telephone number and there's a website, and the website is quite easy. It's utmb.edu/COVID-19/vaccine. And that'll take you right there. And so folks can sign up online. I'm looking for the phone number. Manuela, do you have the phone number like close by? I was just looking for the...
And I was going to say, you can also just Google UTMB COVID vaccine and it pops up.
Mm-hmm. We'll make sure that link and stuff pops up in the comments.
We'll look for that phone number for you, okay?
Perfect. Well, Dr. Dacso, Dr. Murray, this has been such a gift. Do you guys have any final parting thoughts, words, speeches, rousing, And this has just been so good. So I can't thank y'all enough for your time, but did we miss anything? Anything you want to leave people with?
Found the phone number. So
Oh, awesome.
Can you? Okay, it's 877-389-2318.
Awesome.
That's 877-389-2318.
And I sent that to one of my patients today because he doesn't have a smartphone or the internet, so he has a flip phone. And so I texted it to him, and he called it, and he's already gotten signed up.
One of the things that I do want to say is that because I am Hispanic, I have a lot of Hispanic patients that sometimes we want the vaccine distribution to be equal regardless of your race, your social status, your economic status. We want we want everybody that wants to get the vaccine to be able to get the vaccine. And so we also want to reassure people that this information is available in Spanish in the website if they need it, and that the vaccine clinics are safe, that anybody can come. The only thing they're going to ask you, they are going to ask you for something that has your name and your date of birth, but it doesn't have to be a Texas ID. It could be a birth certificate, it could be a passport, anything. It could be a work ID, a student ID, anything that you have that shows your name and your date of birth, just so that when we write down the things on the vaccine registry, we have the accurate information. But going to the vaccine clinics is safe, and we want to make sure that everybody hears that.
Thanks for that. That's important.
Yeah, and I'll just my final thoughts are that boy, I have a lot of final thoughts, but I'll keep them brief. One is that this is we are getting close to the end of this thing, right? That we are beating it. We're beating it back because we've listened to the science, and we have developed these tools that are essential tools, right? But they're one part of the puzzle. So, preventing this disease from killing any more people and affecting the lives of more people it's really a team effort. It's all of us agreeing that we're all in this together, that we want to see a time where we can go and get on an airplane and travel and see folks and go to concerts, and we want to do that. Right now, will it look different? Who knows? Right? I don't know that. Right? I think all we can do is day by day, step by step. And what we have right now is, I think, a lot of hope, because this vaccine, the platforms that are coming out, they are so good and they are so safe. We've never seen this in human history, right? And so we're really on, like Dr. Murray said earlier, we're in this really amazing time where we might. Dr. Fauci said, he wrote a paper about maybe 6 months ago. He said we're in an age of pandemics, right? If you think about think about Ebola, Zika, chikungunya, dengue. These are things that we never thought we'd have to deal with, but they've been here, right? We had Ebola in Texas, right? We've had Zika in Texas, right? And so these are in our backyard. And so to know that we actually are all working together to fight all of these things and to live good, healthy lives, I think it's very encouraging. So I think people should feel very comfortable with where things are going as far as the science and medical practice. But we have a lot of work to do to earn people's trust, and we know that, and we want to do that, and we're ready to do the hard work. So we appreciate you guys, in the faith community, who are doing so much also on the front lines to take care of people. I know you got a lot of splash because of your work with the unhoused community during the great snowpocalypse of 2021. And you guys also deserve a lot of recognition for all you're doing. So we can't do anything without advocates like you in the faith community who are bringing message of calm and support and science to your community. And just know that we're, you know, I speak for myself, and I'm sure a lot of us at UTMB, we're really, I think, proud to have folks like you guys in the community kind of pushing and helping to spread these positive messages of hope.
Wow, what an honor. Thanks so much for saying that. And I just want to flip it back around, that we would be able to share the things that we're sharing, or, you know, try to help our folks understand that this stuff is safe without y'all. And yeah, we wouldn't understand how any of this science stuff works. They don't teach you this in seminary. So really appreciate y'all breaking it down in such layman's terms. I really appreciated y'all's metaphors and your images, and yeah, and just the acknowledgement that this stuff is complicated and confusing, and there's tons of reason to not trust what's going on. But yeah, thanks so much for being here. I know it's a Friday night, not exactly the most oh wait, never mind, it's a Saturday morning. I forgot. Okay,
You'll fix it in post.
There that Michael can edit that out. I know it's a Saturday morning, we should all be, you know, resting and all that, so just I appreciate y'all giving up a little bit of your Saturday to be here. And yeah, just hope this was helpful for anyone watching and for Central folks, and just would encourage everyone to get on the list and get the vaccine whenever it's your turn. And yeah, we're here, and we've got, you know, these connections with UTMB if you have more questions, or if you need help getting signed up and all that stuff. So I think that is everything.
Julia, to splice in somewhere, do you want maybe Dr. Murray to speak to kind of like that point you just said about the, like, which vaccine should I get? Because there are a lot of people who are like, well, I don't want this one, or I want this one. And I mean, do you want to address that at all, or is that kind of out of your scope?
Yeah, whatever.
Let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah. Let's do it. Michael can figure out where it goes.
It is only Friday night. We got till Saturday morning.
Sorry.
We got all the time. It's all good.
I forgot.
Yeah, Dr. Manuela, would you talk about the different vaccines?
Yeah, so I think the take-home message here is the 3 vaccines that have been approved in the United States are effective, and they're safe. They're definitely safe. And even though 2 of them are very similar, but they're different from the other one, from the Johnson & Johnson, I think that if you have the opportunity, if you're being offered the opportunity to get vaccinated with one of these 3 vaccines, go for it. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine also has the advantage that it's only 1 dose. And so that, of course, you're going to pretty much be protected 2 weeks after you get the first dose. So it has its advantages. And to tell you the truth, I think that the vaccine is being distributed to the different sites based on how that site is capable of maintaining the integrity of the vaccine, because they have different requirements on the temperature that they need and all of that. And so people are going to show up for their vaccine appointment, and it's very likely that there is only going to be one option at that site at that moment. And so I want to reassure everybody that the 3 vaccines that we have are safe and effective.
Yeah, that's so helpful.
Yeah.
Dr. Dacso, Dr. Murray, thank y'all so much for making time and for answering these questions. And yeah, we just feel so fortunate to have relationships like this with y'all. So thanks again, and
Yeah.
take care.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks so much, y'all.
All right. Anytime.